الطاهرين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل الفرج. First and foremost, welcome to all the participants here in this course, in this particular module. And inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us as those who are partaking on a journey to better ourselves and our understanding of the deen. This module consists of many different subtopics, subunits, and they will be taught by different students from Qom. In today's session, you'll see that Brother Hussein will take us through some aspects of the Holy Quran, hopefully developing a friendship with the Holy Quran. We hope to analyze certain verses and extract and take a deeper look at some of the carefully chosen verses from the Holy Quran. Then after that, I'll take you guys through the first chapter of um, getting to know ourselves better. So a good summary of this module would be I am a Muslim, in the sense that we have some aspect of studies about the I, meaning who this I is, the human in both the intellectual, with an intellectual understanding, as well as textual uh, evidence is given as to what this I looks like in the Islamic paradigm, right? And then we go on to building other topics which talk about what is taslim, what does Muslim becoming a Muslim actually mean, where the ahkam come from, and so on and so forth, led by other scholars in future sessions. For today's session, we'll start off with a short uh, analysis, a short understanding, and deeper dive into really a few of the selected verses of the Holy Quran. And then we'll continue on to um, getting to know ourselves a little bit better. Right? Now, right after the explanation of the Holy Quran, we will take about a 5-minute break, because on this end in Qom, it will be Fajr time. After that 5-minute break, then the session on knowing ourselves better will commence, inshallah. So, inshallah, when Brother Hussein is able to log in quickly, he's trying right now. He'll start, inshallah, with the portion on the Holy Quran. Until he comes, do any of you guys have any questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I just wanted to ask how's your day been so far? I'm glad to be here.
Alhamdulillah. My day just started about an hour ago. It's 4:30 a.m. here.
Oh man, that's the good life. That's the good life. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My name is Kumail. I'm joining from Toronto, so it's nighttime here.
Yeah.
As you know, so thank you for waking up early, and inshallah, we hope to learn a lot from here. Just if you can, just give us a brief introduction on the teachers and what their specialties are and what they're studying in Qom. So if without taking up too much time, so that at least we understand, who's teaching us and a little bit more about the personalities behind this.
Sure. So I'll give you an overall breakdown of the teachers that we have in store for you guys for this entirety of the module. So we have Sheikh Mahdi Qasim Ali. He's been studying in Qom for about a decade. He's finished his master's thesis. Really strong student in many of the fields here. Fiqh, usul. He's taught ahkam here in the Hawza as well. So not only is he a student at the Hawza, but he's also a teacher. He teaches some courses here too. We also have Brother Mujahid Nurani. The Mujahid Nurani is somebody who's been in Qom for about 8 years now. He's studied fiqh, usul, and he's also taught some courses here as well, like Arabic, grammar, and so on and so forth. Then you have myself. I've been here in Qom since about, let's say, close to a decade as well. and I've studied fiqh, usul, philosophy, Aristotelian logic. I can give more course material for myself because I know myself a little bit more in depth than the other brothers. They've taken similar courses, but I'll let them introduce themselves fully when they teach their particular module. Um, so I've also taught some courses here in Qom, and I've done a lot of online teaching as well. Through Ali, I've done some courses as well as I've taught some book clubs in Toronto. I was in Toronto this last year. Almost all of us are from GTA, by the way. Either ourselves or our in-laws or somewhere. Most families are probably um, uh, predominantly actually from this group that's going to be teaching you. The scholars are almost all from GTA. With the exception of myself, I'm from Kingston, Ontario, but my in-laws are from GTA. Um, we all have gone back and forth from Toronto, know the community there, within our own Husseinias and circles and so on and so forth. And we thought to come together and offer this course, teaching it together, and hopefully that will give you guys various types of explanation in the sense that each person speaks slightly differently than the other. And you'll have various types of what we call bayan, an explanation in terms of the content given. And there's a unicity in the content, really. So I hope you'll appreciate that. So, we also have Brother Hussein Mushtahidi, who's going to be teaching. He has been studying in the Hawza for a few years too. Um, uh, right now he's doing fiqh and usul. And inshallah soon he'll start teaching here as well. We have Sayyid Farhan, who will be coming in assisting us as well in teaching. And um, he's also from Toronto, from Mississauga area. He's also studied fiqh and usul and philosophy, inshallah, and soon he'll be starting to teach as well here in the house. I think that pretty much summarizes the teachers that are listed on your module as teachers. Do you have any more questions about them? Or is this a brief introduction okay?
I think that's fine. Thank you very much.
I think Brother Hussein is just having a little bit of trouble trying to log in onto the Zoom platform.
I'm in.
Hussein's in. So if you're in, Bismillah, take over.
My phone.
And we
Computer
can
wasn't
start.
working.
So Brother Hussein is going to take over now and commence the portion on the Holy Quran. Salawat, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم. Please do confirm for me if you can still see me. You should be able to. Shouldn't be any technical issues. If you do have any questions while I'm speaking, there's no need to text them unless you're not comfortable. If you are not comfortable speaking, then you can. Otherwise, turn on your microphones and you can speak, inshallah. The plan was, inshallah, as you had heard already, that we will begin our sessions every week with a 15-minute tadabbur on the Holy Quran. A question arises here from the get-go when we speak about tadabbur. Two questions actually. The first is about a routine with the Quran. That tadabbur, is it a one-time thing? How is it done? Should we do it? Should we not do it? From the get-go, we should speak about a routine with the Quran, meaning that our maraja have told us, and our fuqaha, those from the past, those from the present, have put an extreme emphasis, not an extreme, but rather an emphasis on reading the Quran on a daily basis. Now, we have heard from many of our ulama that you should read a juz a day, half of a juz a day. We know that from the likes of Imam al-Khomeini, rahmatullah alayhi, they would read 3 ajza a day. In 10 days, they would have a whole khatm of the Quran completed. Now, we're not speaking on that level. Rather, we're saying for the likes of you and I, meaning those who believe in a religion, in the religion of Islam, and those who claim that to a certain degree, we want to be those who propagate the religion. Perhaps we're on a youth group, or perhaps we're on to whatever capacity. We're in a group of friends where we have a sort of claim that we are religious and there's a sort of religiosity that exists in our lives. If that is the case, or at the very bare minimum we claim to be Muslims, then the Quran should have a place in our daily routine. So at the very least, we should be reading a page of the Quran a day. Now, when we read a page of the Quran a day, which is the bare minimum, in fact, how is it that we incorporate tadabbur? What does tadabbur mean? In that one page of the Quran that perhaps you read in a day, one of these ayat from that page you can take and ponder upon, as opposed to pondering upon the whole page. What does it mean to ponder upon the ayah? There are two examples we can give that make tadabbur practical and applicable, and something easy and quick to do. That way it doesn't take up much time. For example, number one form of tadabbur that our teachers have mentioned is that you can think about the effects of the ayah on your life if you were to practice it. In fact, one of the meanings of tadabbur that our mufassirin mention is this. So for example, in the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُم. For what reason? Why is it that fasting has been prescribed upon you in the same way it's been prescribed upon the nations before you? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So that you may reach taqwa, so that you may become God-wary, God-conscious, pious. You may realize that Allah is always aware of what you do, has power over all things, etc. One of the effects that you can see is that, for example, you look at statistics. For example, there's a statistic in Iran which mentions that in the month of Ramadan, the crime rate reduces, or comes down, or it decreases, sorry. So from this, you can see, look, one of the effects of siyam in society is that the crime rate decreases, for example. This is something that might open your mind when you think about the ayah. This is one form of tadabbur, when you think about the effect of the ayah when it's applied. The second form of tadabbur, which is also very easy, is that one ayah that you're looking at, that you're pondering upon, you internalize the ayah, and then the output is in the form of supplication. What does that mean? For example, the ayah of the Quran says that the biggest losers are those who الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. That those who are the biggest losers in their actions are those individuals who they struggled in this life, they made an effort, they did something, they practically did something. Yet, you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they're the biggest losers because that which they were doing wasn't what they were meant to be doing. And therefore, their actions are all wasted. They did something maybe had the wrong intention. They went in the wrong door. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They thought, gung-ho, let's go forward. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And all the actions got wasted. You internalize this ayah. You ponder upon this ayah in the sense that you think to yourself, if this were me, what position would I be in? And the output is a dua. For example, you say, Ya Allah, there are those whose actions were wasted in this world because they thought that which they were doing was the right thing, and it turns out that they were very wrong. They miscalculated. For example, they jumped the gun. Ya Allah, don't make me amongst those individuals. Just like that, your tadabbur is completed. So these are two examples where you can see that tadabbur doesn't mean that I need to go and open the books of tafasir. I have to go look at what the scholars have said about the ayah. I need to go look at 5 different English translations and start comparing them. This translator brought this word. That translator brought another word. This translator omitted the whole word altogether. Maybe he didn't consider that word I don't have to do any of this, right? All it took was that I either took the first method of, I looked at the effects of the ayah, if it's applied in society or if it's applied by myself, or I looked at the ayah and said, this ayah is speaking about a reality, Ya Allah, include me amongst these people. Or that this ayah is speaking about a reality that is not good. For example, we have an ayah that says that إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ. There were individuals who didn't pass this test. Ya Allah, you have made our wealth and our families a test. People didn't pass this test. Ya Allah, make me amongst those who are able to pass this test. That's your tadabbur, just like that. The next question is, well, look, you're talking about tadabbur as if tadabbur is something that we're actually able to do, and you've given us these examples. Well, how do I know that this is not something that only the scholars can do? I'll give you something higher. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rebukes us. He puts us, not that he puts us down, but he really asks us a question to shake us, saying, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. What's the matter with you guys? How come you guys don't do tadabbur? Are there locks upon your hearts or something? Is there a reason why you're not doing tadabbur or pondering upon the Quran? So we find that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking all of us, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ, what is the reason for why you're not pondering? It tells us that tadabbur on the Quran isn't reserved, it's not exclusive to the ulil albab. It's not, it's not exclusive to a particular group of people, just the ulama, just the scholars. No, it's not the case. And we mentioned what some of the meanings of tadabbur are, how you could do it. So inshallah, in these sessions, what we want to do is examine some of these ayat of the Quran. If you can, I would like you to open the Quran if you have the physical copy in front of you. If you don't, then on your phones. Bring Surah Al-Imran, and we want to look at 2 ayats together. If you have a translation with you as well, particularly, hopefully, if you are able to access the translation of Ali Quli Qarai, that would be better. Some of the reasons is, for example, that he's a Shia. So when Sayyid Ali does the translation of the Quran, his madhab has an effect on the way he translates the ayat. Please come to Surah Al-Imran, verses 132 and 133. We want to analyze these 2 ayat, inshallah, from today onwards. But in this first session that we have, we don't want to go into too much depth. We're not going to open it up too much. It'll just be a quick overview. Our time is running short. I began a bit late. So inshallah, we'll just do a quick overview. We'll assign some homework, and then we'll conclude this initial session. So now that you have the ayah, inshallah, we'll recite the ayah together. You all don't need to turn your microphones on, but wherever you are at home, please try to recite the ayah out loud. One of the recommendations with reciting the Quran is that it's recited out loud. And our ulama would actually emphasize this a lot, especially at night. The likes of Allama Tabatabai and other individuals as well, whose names we won't mention, would recite the Quran every night out loud. And their families would mention that this is something that they kept up. This was like their tradition. Every night we would hear them recite the Quran. So inshallah, we'll recite these 2 ayahs together. And wherever you are, inshallah, recite them with us. Ayah 132 and 133 of Surah Al-Imran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأطيعوا الله والرسول لعلكم ترحمون. وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين. The translation is as follows: and obey Allah and the Apostle so that you may be granted His mercy. Hasten towards your Lord's forgiveness and a paradise as vast as the heavens and the earth, prepared for the God-wearing. In the 5 minutes or less that we have left, we want to make a few questions pop up in our heads, and then inshallah we'll assign some homework and we'll conclude. We don't want to enter the ayah too much from today. When we look at this ayah, there's a few things that should come up in our heads right away. Number 1, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayah is asking us, ati'u. Now, in the translation that we read, the word was translated as obey. For the time being, we're just going to use the Arabic word of ita'a. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us of ita'a. A preliminary question that we need to ask, if you have your Qur'ans and you're looking at the context of the verses, and we're Surah Al-Imran, verse 132 and 133, you'll notice that in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ayah 130 is addressing the believers. يا أيها الذين آمنوا, verse 130. لا تأكلوا الربا أضعافا. In the next ayah, وَاتَّقُوا النَّارِ. In the next ayah, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهِ. So all of these ayat are connected. With the wow, ayah 132 is connected to the previous one. Ayah 131 is connected to 130. 130 begins with يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Question number one. This ita'a that's being asked is being asked of whom? It's being asked of الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا are those who believe, meaning belief exists in their heart. Belief is in their heart. How do I know this? Because in Surah Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows me that He's very strict with the criteria of belief. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that a group believes, if He says that a group is alladhina amanu, that means that belief has actually entered their hearts. Otherwise, He would not refer to them as alladhina amanu. How do I know this? In ayah 16, sorry, in ayah 14, in ayah 14 of Surah Hujurat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us a story. He says, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. That a group of the Bedouin Arabs had come to the Prophet. There was a famine or a drought, if I'm not mistaken. And they had come and they said, hey man, we believe. Amanna. So these rations that you're giving out, we need a portion for ourselves. We want something from you. Can we get something a little bit extra maybe? And at the end of the day, we're believers. So, and here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and He says, قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. Wait a minute. You've come in with this premise. You're saying, we believe, we're believers. Hold up. Who says you believe? Iman hasn't entered your hearts. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that don't just come and claim and say you have Iman. Iman hasn't entered your hearts. You can say you've submitted to the oneness of Allah, that there's no one worthy of worship besides Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent prophets and the final one is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and you've accepted this, you've submitted to it. Don't claim Iman if you don't have it. So in this verse, because in ayah 130, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began saying, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, we understand that in 132, this ita'a that's being asked is being asked of those who already believe. What is this ita'a that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the believers? This is the first thing that we want to think about for our next session, inshallah. The second thing we want to think about is Ati'u Allah wa Rasul. We have other ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasula wa ulil amri minkum. You guys know the ayah, you haven't memorized. Why is it that over there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said Ati'u wa Ati'u? Here, He doesn't bring this Ati'u a second time. He says Ati'u Allah wa Rasul. To give you a little bit of context to help refine the way you're thinking about the ayah, you can think about the salawat. In the salawat, that's my phone. In the salawat, we have Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the salawat, we're told that we don't say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. I don't know if this is distracting you, or it's distracting me. No, there, fixed. In the salawat, we say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And we're told that we don't say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. We don't add this word ala a second time. One of the reasons why, just to jog your thinking, is that we say that Muhammad and al Muhammad are not two separate entities. These two are connected. The salawat that we're sending on Muhammad, we are sending on al Muhammad. We've put these two together. So that should help give you some context insofar as our connection of Allah wa Rasul. Why is it that we said Ati'u Allah wa Rasul here? In other places we say Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasul. Our final question that we want to ask, or the final thing that we want to think about, actually our time is up, we'll leave it there. Some homework that we want to assign, and then inshallah we'll conclude. So while we're thinking about these ayat, inshallah, in this week, while you're reading the ayat, you're pondering upon what has been said here. What is it that Allah wants from the believers? The homework that we want to assign is that in these two ayat, 132 and 133, please look at the translation and and try to break down each of the Arabic words that are mentioned in the ayat with their translation. Inshallah, next week we'll ask you, all the participants, we'll basically quiz you to see how much of it you've retained. So for example, you'll break down the ayah that says, wa ati'u Allah, the wow means what? Ati'u means what? La'alla means what? Sari'u means what? Etc. Inshallah, that concludes our session on tadabbur for this week. My apologies, we had some technical difficulties connecting at the beginning of the session, but we figured that out. Inshallah, for the next session, please have the homework completed, i.e., breaking down the words of the ayah so that you understand the translation, at least the bare bones of the ayah, what these Arabic words mean that we'll be discussing, and ponder upon what these two ayahs are saying at a very, very surface level. There's no need to enter into looking at tafasir, etc. Ponder upon what the ayah is asking. At the end of the day, this ita'ah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants is from alladhina amanu. And you and I, apparently, we claim this belief. So inshallah, this is something that we'll think about for this coming week. And in our following session, inshallah, we will open up each of these portions of the two verses, each word, what it means and what it's referring to. And inshallah, we'll have beneficial sessions together. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Thank you, Brother Hussein, for taking us through some of the tadabbur portion. Well, near the end of his session, it became Fajr prayer here, so I myself went and prayed. That saves us 5 minutes of that break that I had talked about. We can continue right on to the next particular course, inshallah. The next portion is talking about so hopefully you realize that each session now, when we come together and we go through this particular module, will consist of one portion of looking at the verses of the Holy Quran, right? And another portion will look at one of the units being presented in a different light, basically. So today's unit that you're gonna go through with me is understanding ourselves. The first chapter of that will be the body and soul and the four faculties of mankind. So Brother Hussein just took us through one portion of tadabbur that will continue over 3 weeks or so, right? So with those same verses, you're going to be dealing with them for about 3 weeks. And aside in parallel to those particular verses, you're going to be dealing with certain units as well. The first unit will be the body and soul, and the four faculties of mankind will continue like that, inshallah. Again, a post-session email will be sent with material that was covered and text that actually is recommended and highly recommended that you read through before the next week, which will help you, which basically will help re-emphasize some of the points that are covered. If any points were left out, they'll be there in the text as well. And basically the next session that you come to the class, you can ask questions to the instructor regarding that text or any discrepancy you saw between that which was taught and that which is in the text, any questions you may have as well. Without further ado, let's start with this particular chapter, body and soul and the four faculties of mankind. So before we get to speaking about the soul and the faculties, we take a slight introduction at a different level altogether. We talk about the general idea of how we study objects. There are two ways of studying objects, right? So one way I could say is, let's sit down in a classroom and let's talk about the sun and what a good summer day looks like. Right? We describe with words what the sun looks like, and we tell you about the temperature of the sun and the color and all the details of physics and chemical makeup of the sun and so on and so forth. Right? We sit down in a classroom and talk about that and talk about the social effects of the sun, the biological effects of the sun, humans, on other creatures, and so on and so forth. Then we sit down, we talk about it through this medium of words, right? So this is one way of looking at and discussing and studying an object. A second way is I take you out on a hot summer day and I let you experience that particular sun, right? You experience throughout your life the effects of that sun on your person and those things around you and so on and so forth. The second way is study by experience. So the first was study by medium, right? And the second is a way of studying by experience. Now, these two are two drastically different ways of studying. So in today's session, although we'll try to use words, but our main focus is on your experiences. So when we're talking about the soul and we're talking about the faculties of the soul, right? We'll use words to direct your attention towards past or current experiences that you have regarding those particular faculties of mankind and the soul. So keep that in mind. The mode that we're going towards is kind of a mixture of the two. That we are sitting in a classroom, we are using words to discuss, but that object that we're studying and discussing, well, we're experiencing at the same time as well. It's like talking about the sun while you're outside in the sunlight itself, right? And experiencing the effects of it on the person and those around you. So that's the first introduction that we need to understand regarding the methodology of going through and discussing about ourselves and our faculties. Right? The second important thing is to understand what are tools and how do they affect us. Right? So if you can think of take a minute, right, and consider the types of tools that you have accessible to you as a person, right? So for example, we have meter sticks, we have weighing machines. So these are external tools to ourselves. These are tools that we use with our body to look at different types of measurements and different qualities and quantities around us, right? And we have tools such as like our eyes, our hands. These tools are important as well. So the hand can tell and the texture of a cloth, if something is rough or smooth, if it's cold or if it's hot, right? We have our eyes, which are able to see different aspects of things, how deep something is, how close something is, how sharp something is, how far something is, and so on and so forth, right? The experience of the sharpness is again done with our hand, but our visual effects, we can also gander at the sharpness through our eyes as well. So it has some capacity to do that too, right? So we have different types of tools, and each type of tool serves its own particular purpose. If I was to tell you, can you please weigh something for me, and I handed you a meter stick, you'd laugh at me and say, well, that's not the right tool for that particular measurement, right? Because a meter stick simply just can't. It's not that there's the weight doesn't exist or the weight has some sort of issue. It's just that the tool that you've chosen for that particular assessment simply can't handle that assessment. It's beyond the scope of the tool to assess weight by just means of a meter stick. Right? If I give you a weighing scale and said, could you measure the perimeter of this particular room? Again, you'd be like, well, wait a second. It's not that the tool is faulty, it's just this is not the right application of the tool, right? In a very similar manner, when we're talking about the nafs of humans, the metaphysical aspect of man, right? This metaphysical aspect cannot be measured or looked at by a physical tool. So if I say, well, can I use a microscope to somehow see this? I could see cells. Can I see the faculty of anger through the microscope? Well, it's not that the microscope is at fault, nor is it the fact that the faculty doesn't exist. Rather, it's that the wrong tool is being employed for this particular task. The tool to measure um, a physical entity, again, has physical properties to it. And even that is constricted on if you're trying to measure the distance or the weight and so on and so forth. Different tools are there for those too. In a very similar sense, the metaphysical realities also have measurable capacities, right? Ascertain their existence and so on and so forth. And that tool cannot be a physical one. So you can't say, well, here's a proof of your soul existing, and as a proof of the soul existing, we bring about this particular mechanism or machinery or any material thing that look based off of this, your soul exists. Right? Or you say, oh, you know what? I want to put a camera in the grave, and then after the person passes away, I want to see if the soul is doing something. Oh, no, that physical tool can only assist you in the physical realm, right? Simply doesn't have access to the metaphysical. It's not the tool is broken, it's just beyond its capacity. That's what you're asking of it. Right? So we have tools, and tools themselves also have um, another aspect of them, which is their error ratio. So I remember doing chemistry in class in university, and we'd have these extremely detailed mass scales, right? Basically, we could measure the mass of a particular item that we place on it to a very, very specific degree, and in our reports, we have to place a plus or minus sign and tell you the percentage error uh, of that particular calculation, or even the masses. And we realized that, you know what? If I wanted to weigh, let's say, a suitcase going for the airport, you know, the scale I use has one percentage error, and if I was to use a cooking scale at home, that particular scale has a different type of error. And if I was to use a scale at a pharmacology lab to do research, right, then that scale has a very different type of error margin. So the tools, although they're measuring a very similar thing, refinement of the tool also refines the error margin. It decreases it. You get a better understanding of what really is there, right? And none of the tools are exclaiming that they give you an exact understanding. They all have a percentage error, right? All that substance is in front of you, that let's say Tylenol, acetaminophen, or whatever the case may be, is in front of you, right? Right? You're trying to measure exactly the amount of this particular substance you have in front of you. No matter what tool you're using in the physical realm, they'll have their percentage errors associated with them. Okay, this is important to understand for our nafs too. So based on how you refine your tool that you're going to measure, you use to measure and evaluate and understand your nafs, right? That refinement process also determines now the percentage error, and then exactly how nuancedly can you understand that which you have, the nafs, right? So these are some parables to understand between uh, external tools and internal tools. And external tools, external to the body, as well as external meaning that tools that are used to measure things that are outside of you, extra to you, right? So your hands and your eyes and so on and so forth are also then considered external tools, right? There's a difference between them and, let's say, a meter stick and weighing scale. We discussed that already. But to measure our nafs and to measure the immaterial, we need an internal tool. Take a pause here for a second and let you consider what internal tools you guys have. So if you want to use a chat, or if you want to use your microphone, and tell me, what internal tools do you have that are not external, right? These tools are not material in nature. Okay, so one of the participants says fitra. Okay, can you tell me, okay, so another person says intellect. Okay, do you need proof that you have intellect, or is it something that is experientially there, and the whole world can come and say you don't have intellect, but you will say, no, no, I can experience it. Here's a question. So do you require a proof that you have intellect? Right? Like, do I have to come and prove to you that you have an intellect? Can I come and prove to you that you have an intellect? Right? Meaning that before this proof, you didn't believe that you had an intellect, and now after this proof, all of a sudden you believe that you have an intellect. Can such a proof exist? Or is an intellect something that is part of your experience, that doesn't require a proof? Rather, a proof cannot be given for it. Which one do you think it is? For the intellect in particular. So yes, an intellect is an internal tool that we have. Okay. The intellect is experienced by one's ability to think and reason. That's correct. And as you guys open your chats, you'll see these comments that are being posted there. I'm just reading from that. Yeah, an intellect is experienced by one's ability to think and reason. You can also measure intellect physically through IQ skills. Okay. So you can measure something, some aspect of the intellect through an IQ scale, but the existence of the intellect can IQ scale. So IQ scale gives you the measurement of, once you establish there's such a thing called an intellect, now you want to measure now the capacities of this particular intellect, right? Now, intellect is not limited to the IQ scale. For example, um, uh, emotional intelligence also goes back to actually an intellectual aspect. So the reason I'm asking these questions, because I want you to rethink about what you mean when we say intellect in the Islamic paradigm, right? We don't just necessarily mean IQ, right? We mean something broader than that, your capacity to think in general. Okay, so intellect involves the ability to reason, which is something that you develop over time. That's true. So as you're born into this world, you are do you have an intellect or no? So for you to be able to develop something, must you have it initially or no? By definition, to develop something, if let's say I want to develop something, I want to develop this table, right? I want to make it better, right? Do I have to have a table before I start developing it or no? Okay, so yeah, because we also have another example of I want to develop software. We don't have a software already existing. I have to type it out. The development in that aspect means that you don't have it initially, and then later on you develop and you build onto it. Right? So in this particular case for intellect, I want you guys to think about it. What is this particular thing that we have? Is it something that we are born with, and then we develop it forward, and through experiences grow it? Or no, we're not born with this particular thing, right? And at some instance in our existence, it comes into us, right? So we have to consider both, why we have to consider both is because we're trying to now understand what the intellect is and the role it plays, because we're just trying to study the tool that we have. Right? The intellect, does it have levels or no? So as the brother mentioned the IQ scale, clearly it has a gradation to it, right? So the intellect itself has a lower level and a higher level, even at the level of the IQ, okay? But at the level of just reasoning and thinking and critical analysis and understanding as well, there's a gradation. So I understand more now that I'm 30 than when I did when I was 5, right? So my intellect, it's not like I went to the store and got an upgrade. So you know what, I want, the Core I whatever of my intellect upgraded to the Core I 50 or something. That's not the case. What the components of that particular intellect is what I had when I was younger too. And as I developed it, exactly that. I developed it. I increased its capacity. So if I increase its capacity, right, um, um, then I'm by experience now showing you there's a gradation in this particular tool too, right? So you see, we talked about certain aspects of the intellect. We studied the tool of intellect without me having to dictate to you what the intellect is, and that it has a gradation in it and how it has gradation in it. Through your own experiences, you were able to consider and study it, right? Is an intellect a physical aspect of you? When you point to it, you say, oh, here's the intellect. So an intellect is not a physical aspect of you. In the Islamic paradigm, the intellect is a metaphysical aspect of you. Having said that, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a physical footprint. So your nafs, your body, there's not duality between them in the sense that nafs is one thing and the body is another thing, and they're two separate entities and so on and so forth, and there's no link between them. No, rather there is a link between them. They are connected. There is a unity to them, right? So if your intellectual faculty is metaphysical in nature, but it does have a footprint on your mind. So, for example, certain aspects of your brain, right? And when I said mind, I meant brain, right? Because there's a difference of discussion between whether we have the mind versus the brain discussion, which we'll have soon in a bit. That is this faculty something that is limited to the physical thing that exists up here, the brain, right? Or is that reaction or that particular action that occurs within the brain in terms of the neurons and in terms of the different components of the mind, is it rather the footprint of something greater than that, right? So in the Islamic paradigm, we believe that the intellect is a metaphysical thing. It's not something that's physically uh, tangible and pointable and doesn't exist in the physical realm. Rather, it exists in the metaphysical realm, right? Although it does have a connection to the physical realm by means of the brain. That's true. So we believe that. Okay? So if there are when we see differences in certain parts of the brain, if you trigger them, certain reactions, certain capacities of the intellect either diminish or increase, right? Well, that's true. That there is a link between them. There is a relationship between the metaphysical and the physical. For the metaphysical to manifest itself in the physical realm, right? It requires that particular physical medium, right? So if you were to damage that physical medium at that level, whichever level that damage or that particular inhibition occurs in the physical medium, that metaphysical medium can't manifest. Not that it doesn't exist, no, it just can't manifest anymore. So it's like me and trying to drive a car. If I'm trying to drive a car and you take away the brakes, right? It's not that I don't have the capacity to engage brakes, it's just the brakes aren't there for me to engage, right? So definitely the car does play a role, but then is a car the independent variable in me driving it? No, I'm the independent variable. I'm the one that was driving the car, right? But a change in the car or a deviation in the car's mechanics will inhibit my capacity to drive it, right? So in the Islamic paradigm, in the Islamic paradigm, the intellect is a tool, for measurement, and a tool for understanding, really, right? And this tool is a metaphysical one, although it does have a physical footprint. It is linked to the physical realm as well, right? Any questions here so far? Before we go on. No questions? Okay. Next point of discussion is that now that we have this tool called the intellect, okay, we talked about the percentage error, remember? Well, every tool had a percentage error as well, because well, if you're considering something by means of a medium, by means of a tool, then that tool doesn't encompass that substance entirely. And because it's now measuring that substance, the tool can only measure at the capacity that it has, right? So it can only give you an understanding of what really is at the level that it can give you. So for example, if I had a measuring scale, as I said, my weighing scale to measure suitcases, right, might only read kilograms, might not even give me any decimal places, right? I'll tell you exactly the closest kilogram. Although the suitcase that I'm measuring in reality isn't necessarily very black and white in terms of it being only 25 kilograms or 24 kilograms, right? There's possible for the suitcase to be 24 and a half, right? So intellectually, I can understand that the suitcase might have a capacity and might exist at a level where it's between 24 and 25, but the measuring tool that I have can either show me 24 or show me 25, right? So there's a lack of ability in the tool to ascertain the exact quantity of the weight that's there for the suitcase. In a very similar manner, other measuring tools that we have also have this percentage error too, right? So our intellect as well now, when we're using our intellect to consider certain scenarios, right? Based on how we develop our intellect, right? Based on how we hone our intellect, the percentage error decreases. So our capacity to actually understand that which is, right, is based off of how we hone our intellect. So one, if you consider, for example, a young person, let's say somebody who's 12 years old, 13 years old, doesn't have a lot of experience to go off in life, and intellectually also is in the form of they're maturing, they haven't fully matured yet, right? Their intellectual faculty. If they're going to look at certain aspects of their life and decisions that they're going to make, they will be vastly different than somebody who's in their 40s, in their 30s, right? These two individuals will make very different choices. They'll analyze scenarios and situations in two very different ways, right? Their perception of that same event might be two very different things, right? The capacity of looking at that event is by means of your intellect. We said we don't want to limit the understanding of intellect to just IQ, right? Simply the capacity to understand is linked to the intellect as well. So this understanding of the world around you, that situation around you, right, goes through this particular filter of your nafs called the intellect. Your nafs can understand, your person can understand the scenario or the event or the particular item even that surround you, right? And it's done so by the means of the intellect. So let's take an example of a PlayStation 5 controller and PlayStation 5 playing games, like favorite games on them, okay? Let's say you have a young person, you have somebody whose intellect is developing. When they look at the intellect, and they look at the PlayStation, sorry, their intellect looks at it in a particular way. Their faculty of intellect looks at it as their understanding of this particular tool is one that's filled with enjoyment and happiness. And when it comes to now looking at the importance of that particular tool, evaluating the importance of that tool, right? And here that word intellect is being used as a general term for that capacity of the nafs to understand that tool. It's very different than somebody who's in their 80s or their 50s looking at that tool, right? The person who's in their teens, the colors and the mode that it's kept in and the specs of it and so on and so forth, they're important. They're important for the person and based on their capacity to look at this reality before them, right? Um, that's what determines the value for that item too. Now, for another person, let's say whose intellect has matured slightly and they realize, let's say, I could make 50,000 gold coins on this, let's say, imaginary coins or whatever on this PlayStation 2. It gives me some enjoyment while I'm playing it, but developing this virtual character really doesn't do much good for my person. Like if it's inhibiting me from developing my actual person, from developing my actual relationships in life, my actual work, physical form, family, and so on and so forth. If it's causing an inhibition, well, that virtual character and that virtual blessings, if you will, quote unquote, if I was to acquire them, they have very little when it comes to my actual blessings that I have, my physical being to take care of my wife, my kids, my workplace, and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, as the intellect matures, right, the percentage error decreases, and all of a sudden things are looked at in their appropriate light. So it's not the case that the PlayStation loses all value. No, it's a source of entertainment, and it remains that. It doesn't take over the entirety of your life now, right? As your intellectual capacities increase, you deal with it as what it is. It is a source of entertainment. So you allow it to perform its particular action. You don't place it up on a pedestal, nor do you take it down and say there should be none of it at all in my life entirely, period. No, it's a source of entertainment, right? And your intellect determines that in your actions, right? So your intellect is the tool that you use, which play out then in your actions. Now, we understood this idea that we have this tool called the intellect, right? And we can use it to consider different scenarios. Right now, we were talking, there was no PlayStation. There was no, in the physical world, there was no PlayStation there in this example. This was a cognitive exercise, right? We thought of the PlayStation, we thought of the different scenarios and so on and so forth, right? So we realize our intellect has this capacity too. So now one particular object that I would like you guys to consider is yourself. Right? With the same intellect, consider yourself. Consider in this particular way. See, when you were a child, your physical form was very different than to what your form is right now. And then when you grow older, your physical form will be very different too. So before I didn't have a beard, my face wasn't this big, my hands and body weren't this big. The components, even internally of my body, the cells that make me up, the very cells themselves weren't the same cells. So 30 years ago, the cells that made me up, that's this particular body that I'm calling Sayyid Kamil, right? This particular body was made up of very different cells back then than it is right now, right? Aside from brain neurons, most other cells changed, right? So I could say that the majority of this body, it physically is different than the body that I had 30 years ago, right? The cells died off, new cells were created, and so on and so forth. So the allocation of this I, however, that when I say I'm here, I'm going in, and this allocation of this myself really, right, to this body of when I was a 5-year-old or 10-year-old or 30-year-old or 50-year-old doesn't change. Right? The allocation and the experiential understanding of me, myself, doesn't change with the changing of the physical body, right? So this is one indication that this I, this self, really has unity between those different physical bodies. So now if I have my physical body at the age of 5, at the age of 15, at the age of 40, at the age of 50, and so on and so forth, if I consider those, if there's a difference in the physical body themselves, right? Yet there is no difference in the I which is experienced. Right? The I is singular and one really throughout this particular range, and that I could say is different than the physical body. This is one explanation of the nafs. Okay, this particular I that you have, this cognition of yourself is not your body. Your body is something that belongs to yourself. Just like how a phone belongs to you and a computer belongs to you, your bag belongs to you, they're not you. Similarly, your hand belongs to you, your eyes belong to you, your body belongs to you, they're not you. Right? It's true, a phone I can go change, right? A hand when it gets cut, or a hand when it experiences some sort of trauma, right? I can go get my hand healed. Okay, I can get it, treated and take medications for it and so on and so forth. My physical body becomes sick. I can go get it treated, right? But when I become sick, that I in myself doesn't become sick. The physical body becomes sick, right? So this unicity and this oneness of the I, while the associated measurement of the I changes, points me to one direction, that this I is something that is existent, separate from, but somehow linked to as well, this physical entity. That I is what we're calling our nafs. That experiential understanding of yourself, independent of the age you're at or the physical components of yours and so on and so forth, the understanding of your I, that is what we call your nafs. This is one explanation of that. Is everybody with me here so far? Do you guys understand this first explanation of the nafs? Can you guys hear me? I don't have any faces to go off of, so I don't know if what I'm said has been understood or not. It's okay. Okay, so let's look at the second explanation of the nafs as well. So this is a slightly more deeper explanation. The first one was to get you to open up to this idea of the nafs being there and what we mean when we say the nafs. The second explanation of the nafs is this. My physical body at every level is divisible. I could divide myself, or I could assume that my hands, has cells in it, and the cells also have components in it, and so on and so forth, right? My physical body is divisible. We don't have something called the indivisible atom, right? Right? Even so I studied physics in university. There's different theories out there, but at the end of the day, every aspect of matter is divisible. Divisibility cannot be taken away from matter. So my physical body exists, right? My physical body can be divided and is divisible, but this I that I experience is not divisible, right? this I remains stagnant. It's not a divisible property. Divisibility is not linked and associated with this I, right? When I say I am hungry, right? This I that I'm talking about, it's not like a part of, like, for example, when you're saying, um, I could say that, for example, my hand is hurting, right? So what I've said is that in the physical body, that the source of hurt is centered around my hand, not my feet, not my head, not my torso. Okay. But consider this, when you say I am feeling pain, right? It's not the case that pain exists on some aspects of your existence. No. It takes over your entire existence. You can't say this aspect, this area of my existence is feeling pain. No. You're right. The source of experiencing that pain could be limited to your arm or your feet, but the experience of pain is something that is experienced throughout your eye. Very good question. The question is, what about people with personality disorders? So they have dual eyes. Would that be a defect in their physical output or the nafs input? So a situation, so when you're looking at any type of um, uh, discrepancy in the personality of people, so you have bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorders, and other disorders where a person's um, uh, nafs, really, the interaction between their nafs and their physical body is strained. Now, where that strain comes from is different for different people. Sometimes this strain is because of a lack of certain physical components. So I gave the example of the nafs carrying a car, or like my body riding a car, and if you take and you tamper with the brakes, well, I just simply won't be able to put the brakes on, right? So our nafs is something that is extremely vast and extremely complex. When it's associated with the physical body, if certain chemicals and certain items are missing in the physical body, right? Then those physical deficiencies allow for the nafs to not really be able to do that which you should be doing. Sometimes the deficiency is in the nafs, not the body, meaning that the origin of the deficiency is in the nafs and it shows itself as a footprint in the body. That's a better way of putting it. So a person would commit some actions or do certain things or experience certain things which will drastically impact their nafs. Let's say you have a child who underwent like some sort of significant trauma when they were a child, right? So this particular trauma will because the experience is not an experience felt by their body, right? Their body is a means, but the experience is felt by their nafs. This particular person will experience some traumatic effect in their earlier stages of development, right? And this will cause some sort of problem for them. So the nafs itself experiences that. So now when they're growing up, if let's say that trauma is felt by the child in their earlier phases, right? And this inhibits their capacity at the social level. They all of a sudden they don't function well in a social level. They were bullied significantly such that it caused a traumatic effect for them when they were in their preschool, let's say, or high school, right? And now when they're in the workforce or they're leading a family, right? In social settings, they have this anxiety and insecurity that they experience, right? The experience of the nafs transfers now into the physical body too. It's possible for there to be physical um, uh, physical changes seen. So for example, we have something called mirror neurons in our brain. So the activity of the mirror neurons in our brain will be very, very different for this particular person as opposed to the person who didn't experience that trauma, right? So this idea of the body and the nafs and their interaction, it does exist. What the exact cause of that particular trauma and that particular defect is needs to be determined on a case-to-case basis, right? Sometimes it's a genetic defect that basically the physical body passed down is missing this particular mineral or this particular item, and that needs to be sorted out. In other cases, it's not a defect that's linked to the genes of the person. Right? It's a defect that is triggered by something else. In some cases, there is a physical defect that has been inherited genetically, right? But it requires a trigger for it to actually come about, right? For example, if you see bipolar disorders at the age of in like it's something that could be so there's some study that suggests that it could be something that could be linked genetically, right? But it requires certain triggers for it to become active. Well, that's possible. That's a possibility. So anyways, this particular phenomenon. So I have some background in studying um, biopsychology and some stuff as well. I'm in the master's for that right now. So I gave you some experiences and some understanding from that too. So when we're looking at the nafs, the secondary, the more deeper understanding of the nafs was what? We say that, well, everything in the physical capacity is divisible, right? It could be divided, but this I cannot be divided, right? So this I, because it cannot be divided, we say that this particular I is in some aspects different from that physical entity, but it's linked to. So it's not the same, at least, as a physical entity. So now this I is not the same as the body, right? It's linked to, but it's not the same. So we're given two intellectual explanations of the nafs. We won't call them proofs, we'll call them intellectual explanations. Right? So given two intellectual explanations of the nafs and what we mean by it, and when we talk about it, right? So this is the I, the thing that is conscious, the thing that is cognizant, right? And the thing that uses the body for the actions that the body performs and so on and so forth, this I. Now let's look at some textual explanations as well. So the intellect takes us so far. Let's see what our creator has to say about this particular thing as an added understanding for ourselves in terms of what the nafs is. Let's look at what the text of the Holy Quran says about it. So if you can please open chapter number 23, verse number 14, please. If you've done so, if you opened it, type that I've opened the text, so then I know that some people have opened it. It may encourage others to open it as well. Chapter 23, verse number 14. Starts off as, it goes something along the lines of, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, ثم خلقنا, like that. Starts off like that. ثم خلقنا, you guys opened it, perfect. ثم خلقنا نطفة علقة. So then the translation of it from Ali, Sayyid Ali Quli Qurai, we're using that predominantly throughout this module. Then we created the drop of fluid as a clinging mass. Okay. ثم خلقنا نطفة علقة فخلقنا علقة مضغة. Then we create the clinging mass as a fleshy tissue. Okay. فخلقنا مضغة عظاما. Then we create the fleshy tissue as bones. وكسونا عظاما لحما. Then we clothe the bones with flesh. Okay. ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر. Then we produced him as yet another creature. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So blessed is Allah, the best of creators. Let's look at what's happening here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, look, there are stages to your creation. He describes the physical stages where the drop of fluid was turned into a clinging mass, and that clinging mass becomes fleshy tissue. That fleshy tissue turns into bones, and then those bones are clothed with flesh. Then he says, this is the physical aspect of the creation. Then we produce them as another creature. ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر. Right? Then we produced that particular thing as a different thing. This difference is a difference of realms, in the sense that up until now we're talking about the physical creation, and according to the Mufassirin, this particular aspect now talks about the introduction of the creation of really the nafs. So now when the nafs is created, right, from that very same physical component, the very same physical component served as the roots, really, as the pot in which that plant was planted, right? And that plant that's planted is the nafs. And then once the nafs is created, Allah says what? He says, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. And he congratulates himself. He says, well, so blessed is Allah. He praises himself, the best of creators. The best of creators, why? Because the best of creation is created, which is what? This thing called the nafs, which has the capacity to be the Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So this physical component of man is taken, and now from that, a different creature is created, right? And a higher level of creature existence is given, cognition and understanding and the faculties and all those components of the nafs at their lower level are granted to that particular creature. ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر. So you guys see what I'm talking about now in that particular verse, how we're talking about the physical components of the creation. And then all of a sudden, before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises himself, he talks about the metaphysical component as well. How are we doing for time? Does anybody know how much time we have left? Is the administration on board? Perfect. That's good. I have about that much material to cover. Okay. So this verse talks about this idea now. So now we've gone through the understanding that we have certain tools to us, and these tools have percentage errors to them. One such inner tool is our intellect, and we considered an object called the nafs, really, and gave some intellectual explanations as to its existence and the separation of its existence from the physical body, that it's not the same as the physical body. So intellectually, we came up to that particular understanding, and then now we used a verse of the Quran as well to display that. That this ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ, this particular phrase of this verse points to this idea that aside from the physical component and makeup of man, right, there exists a metaphysical component as well, right? So we've gotten that. Now we go further and we discuss now what are some of the capacities of this nafs. So it's not the case that the nafs has, as we talked about, it's not divisible, right? So it's not like it has parts like hands and feet. It's not the case that these faculties are separate from one another, like the hands and feet are separate from one another. No. The nafs in all of its faculties is one. It has multiple faculties, many faculties. And of the many faculties it has, another way of understanding those faculties would be capacities, right? So the nafs has multiple and many capacities. So it's one thing, but it has many capacities. For example, an example would be my hand. My fingertips in my hand is one particular tool, one particular item, but it has many capacities to it. I can determine hot and cold. I can determine sharp and dull. I can determine slippery and rigid. So I can determine these three very different things, right? Pertaining to texture from this one particular hand. So it has three different capacities here, right? So the in a very similar manner, the nafs also had certain capacities. Now, the four main capacities that are often talked about, we'll discuss those right now. Again, we started off the discussion saying that there is a means of study by means of experience, and I encourage you to do that. So when I talk about these capacities, just like how you experienced that I, and you were able to ascertain that yes, this I has been the same for me since I was a child, and as I'm older now, right? This I has not differentiated. It's not like a different I now, right? When I refer to myself as a child, I still refer to myself. I don't refer to that child, right? No, I see there's a unicity between the me right now and the me then. I see it as myself, right? And now, and hence I can own up to the actions of myself, even as a kid and now and so on and so forth. That's a different discussion to have, right? The effects of our actions throughout our different levels of growth. But that I-ness remained the same and you experienced that in a very similar manner. Please come and focus on the faculties that this I has and look at the experiences that you have of that. So the four main faculties that are typically talked about, right? And under each of them, there is a plethora of faculties. There's lots and lots of faculties that are there, right? These are just the four main ones. And what I hope to discuss today is explain to you that these are actually capacities. They're not necessarily parts like your hands and feet. No, they're not parts. They're capacities of the nafs, right? There are four main ones that we're discussing. And within the discussion of the four main ones, I'll show you how you actually have multiple faculties within these four main faculties too. Okay. So the four faculties is the faculty of anger, the capacity of the nafs to have anger, right? The faculty of desire, the capacity of the nafs to have desire, right? The faculty of imagination and the faculty of intellect. These are four faculties of the nafs. We use the faculty of intellect to study the nafs itself, right? Let's go further. So again, I talked to you guys, said, do you need any proof that these exist? And we were talking about intellect. I asked you, like, can I provide a proof for you that the intellect exists? Well, no matter what proof I provide you, for you to fathom it, you must use the intellectual faculty, right? To use something, you might not have attention towards it, but is a declaration of its existence. So it's not possible to prove now the existence of something which needs now for you to understand itself. So I can't prove to you the existence of the intellect because no matter what explanation I give you, you need the usage of said intellect to understand that proof, right? So I can only bring your attention to this item that you're using and say, look, this particular tool that you're using to understand me and to hear me and to comprehend what I'm saying, that's what I mean when I say the faculty of intellect. So I'm not here to prove the existence of these faculties by external means. I'm here to just direct your intellect towards the existence of these capacities that your nafs has. Okay. So consider now the faculty of anger. Okay. Imagine the last time you got angry, right? So all of the existence of but it's not like my arm was hurting when I say I'm angry. A part of me was angry. No. I felt anger throughout my person, right? Anger envelops you. You can control it and so on and so forth, but the experience of that anger, it envelops the entirety of that I. It's not partially enveloping the I. It's not experienced partially by the I. Rather, it envelops the I. All of the I becomes angry. And hence I say, I have become angry, right? You have capacity to control it. You have the capacity to uh, um, mold it, really. And the levels of anger also are different. Those are all in their place. But the encompassing of the anger for this entirety of the I is something that I'm trying to focus your intellect towards. So this is one of the faculty and capacities of your person. Right? We also talked about the source of the anger, The source of the anger could be external, it could be internal, could be many different things, but that anger itself is there. The anger here meaning not necessarily just upsetness, but rather any wish to take something away from you. Anything that you determine to be ill or not correct or not good, you want to distance yourself from that item. So this is what anger is here, right? So sometimes it comes in the form of, let's say somebody disrespected you. You want to distance yourself from that disrespect and that particular action that they did. You don't want that action to come close to you again. You don't want to experience that particular action again. And then anger comes forth, and in that particular situation, tries to dictate you to perform some actions such that that action, that disrespect is distanced from you, right? So someone swears at you, and then your anger comes, and you want to, yell at them and say, "Hey, why did you swear at me?" And so on. Okay? So, hala, if you whether you choose to act on your anger or not is a different talk. We'll have that later. But at the moment, I want you to experience that what we mean by the anger faculty. When that particular uh, uh, um, um, word is being said to you, you want to distance yourself from that. In a very similar manner, it's your faculty of anger that tells you that, hey, don't like you have that you want to distance yourself from losing all your money, right? So what you do is you put your money in the bank, and you lock your house, and you make sure there's a strong security system on your bank accounts and so on and so forth. That thing which pushes you towards now making sure you have security in the financial realm also is your anger faculty. So now you're thinking about this anger faculty in a slightly different manner, right? So this anger faculty now is is a faculty that's responsible for pushing away things from you that you do determine that are not good for you, you don't like. Right? Let's go to the second faculty that we have to talk about, the faculty of desire. Okay. So consider your favorite meal, right? Now consider your best friend, consider your parents, consider your spouse, your potential spouse, right? So your nafs has an attraction to each of those things. And this is where I'll open up, and I said there's multiple faculties that you have. I'll explain the multiplicity of that here. So your nafs has something that you can classify as an attraction to each of those things, right? But is your attraction to your favorite meal the same as your attraction to your parents? No. They're both classified as attractions. Your nafs is attracted to them, your nafs desires them, wants them, right? So now the intellectual faculty of desire is the faculty, the capacity of the nafs to pull things close to itself that it wants, that it likes, that it deems are good for it. Okay? So your favorite meal, your best friend, your parents, your potential spouse, right? Earning money, coming to this class, that which pushes you, that brings that motivation for you from the emotional level, from the experiential level, is the faculty of desire. Right? You want to better yourself intellectually, so you attend a class. You want to earn money, so you go and get a job. Right? You like the company of your parents and your best friend, so you are attracted to them and you want to be with them. Right? You like the experience of eating your favorite meal, so you like that particular thing too. Right? So this nafs has this like aspect to this attraction aspect to it, to different things. And when I said we have multiple faculties underneath the faculty of desire and every other faculty as well, you consider the difference in the likeness between your favorite meal and your best friend. Each likeness in of itself is distinct to the thing that is associated with that likeness, right? And hence that's one particular subcapacity of this overall faculty called likeness. Okay. So when we say that these faculties have multiple faculties underneath them, this is what we mean, right? That their appearances, the appearance of this likeness is an association to that which is being liked, right? Can you consider a person who says, I'm in love, right? I love something. And then you ask them, what do you love? And say, well, I haven't decided that yet, but I'm in love. It's not possible. So the faculty of desire actually manifests itself in the sub-faculties, right? And each instance of that particular faculty coming about is now the experience of that sub-faculty. Although in the general sense, all attraction is linked to this faculty of desire. Okay, so this is the second capacity of your nafs that I wanted to push you towards. The third faculty that I want to consider is the faculty of imagination. Okay? So if I was to gather a classroom full of sheeps and I draw for them on a board a picture of a wolf, right? And I say, hey, all you sheeps, look at this picture of this wolf. You have to be scared of it. Are the sheeps going to be like terrified and angry and running around and so on and so forth? No, they're not, right? Because they lack this capacity of imagination. If I was to bring a real wolf in the room, right, then these sheep will be running around. I got a message from somebody saying sheep is plural. Yes, thank you. So all these sheep, all the sheep would be running around. So if I brought a wolf into if I brought a wolf into the room, then all of a sudden these sheep would be like, oh, they're terrified, because now they can see that particular wolf. However, in the form where I was drawing the picture of the wolf and I was asking them to now attribute this wolf to this actual instance outside, the actual animal, right? They simply didn't have the capacity to associate those two things. They didn't associate this picture to be that particular thing, right? The faculty of imagination is something that is that assists us um, in ascertaining the specifics of the scenario. I'll give you two examples, and these are two analogies of the faculties, right? And hopefully they'll assist you in understanding what this faculty does. So these four faculties are quite famously analogized in two scenarios. The first scenario is the scenario of the hunting party, right? So the hunting party, the person riding the horse, there's a guy riding a horse and he has a hunting dog with him, and he has a scout that's looking for prey and bandits and so on and so forth. Okay. So the person who's on the horse itself is the intellect, the horse itself is the faculty of desire, the dog is the faculty of anger, and that scout that's looking out for potential danger, that's looking out for potential gain, right? That's the faculty of imagination. So this capacity for you to look at potential desire and potential gain, this is the faculty of imagination. So ever had those times where someone was talking or laughing in a group and you had this feeling that they were either mocking you or making fun of you or talking against you, right? Or another scenario where you performed certain action, you saw some people smiling and cheering, and you thought they were smiling and cheering you, right? So potential uh, negativities and potential positivities is the role of the faculty of imagination, right? It goes through and creates these and scouts out for these particular potential scenarios of benefit and loss for yourself. So when you go into, let's say, a movie theater and you watch this movie about like someone with superpowers and so on and so forth, and when you're coming out, you have this imaginative feeling that person is you, and you have these superpowers and so on and so forth, and you feel this imaginative sense of accomplishment. This is all linked to your faculty of imagination. Or if you watch a soccer match, for example, and your favorite team scores, and you feel the sensation that is as if you've scored, right? And as if you've gained something, right? This is also assisted by the faculty of imagination. So I'm giving these scenarios to now direct your intellect towards these experiences that you've had. So why are we doing all this? So that you have a wholesome understanding of what it means to be I. What do you mean when you say I? That you actually have these capacities to your person, right? And these capacities are what make up you, right? And the capacity at action, the one that you let lead, determines the type of action you perform as well. We'll get to that in further chapters. The last faculty to consider, and we'll end the session today. How are we doing for time? Do we have 5 minutes? Oh, I'm checking it now. Okay. If you give me just 2 minutes, I'll cover the faculty of intellect, and then we'll conclude the session for today. I'll provide you with reading materials as well. So consider the time that you got really angry at somebody, and out of fear of punishment or some sort of uncertain outcome, you stopped yourself from getting angry, right? What do you know that? You stopped yourself from displaying that anger, okay? You didn't stop the anger, you stopped the display of the anger, okay? So that force within you, that capacity within you, which could block your anger from coming out into action, that particular faculty is the faculty of your intellect. So you considered the scenario, you said, well, wait a second, if I do this, if I punch this person back, or if I yell at this person back, there's severe punishment for me, there's some negative outcomes that I don't want, right? And I don't want to get those negative outcomes. So even though I feel angry, I'm gonna not display it, okay? This is the faculty of intellect. In a very similar manner, consider the scenario that you as a person, you were trying to lose weight and you had the opportunity to eat a lot of your favorite food item, right? Or you were attracted to somebody and you had a crush on somebody. And out of fear of sin or out of fear of some sort of uncertain outcome, negative outcome for you, right? Both in the case of you gaining weight, so in the food example of a desire, you didn't want to gain weight. And the example of the carnal desire, you didn't want the negative outcome, whether it be sin or whatever the case may be. You refrain from acting on that desire, right? So it's not the desire that attraction doesn't exist, that attraction and that attraction to a food and that particular person, whatever, that attraction doesn't disappear. Rather, your intellect comes and now it controls the output of that particular faculty of desire. So now in this particular scenario, your intellect is something that has the capacity to both control and direct the other faculties, right? It is a faculty by which you understand things, you compare things, you study things, you analyze things, right? And that's one aspect of the intellect. And the second aspect that I gave by these examples is that it also has the capacity to now supersede the other faculties. It doesn't make them not exist. It doesn't make it such that you don't get angry. It doesn't make it that you don't get attracted to someone or something. No, it supersedes that particular emotion, that particular initial faculty of desire or anger, right? And it controls the output of action. It controls the output of display, right? So these are two aspects of the intellectual faculty. If a person is having difficulty in now controlling the output and the display of their desire and the display of their anger, right? It's directly linked to the weakness of their intellectual faculty, right? At whatever level you have this difficulty in controlling the desire and controlling the anger, right? There's a direct link to the deficiency in the faculty of anger, the capacity of your nafs to intellectually think and to intellectually moderate your person. Right? Your nafs's intellectual capacity is weaker. Right? There's ways of making that stronger and so on and so forth. We'll cover some of those in sessions to come. But this concludes for us today's session. We talked about tools and ways of studying things. We talked about the inner tool of intellect and considered our nafs as an object of study, gave two reasons as to why this nafs is different from our body, right? Although connected to our body. We looked at a verse of the Holy Quran that said something very similar to us, right? And then we opened up the four faculties and gave you a deeper explanation of what they are. I hope that you guys learned from this session. May I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts this session as a means of ibadah towards Him. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The question is, so the definition of intellect is the capacity to control the output of our faculties. I said two aspects of the intellect. One aspect of it was the capacity to control. The other aspect was the aspect of intellect which we use to consider things, study things, evaluate things, right? These are the two aspects of the intellect. Actually, the controlling of the faculties stems from that consideration and evaluation. Okay. So this is the end of the session today. Inshallah, hopefully I'll answer the question. Inshallah. See you guys next session.